It is my deep honor to welcome all of you to this very exciting and joyous occasion tonight. There are many, many people to thank, so I am not going to try and do all of them because I will leave someone out. So first, thanks to the chorus and to Joyce and Terry for starting us off this evening in an amazing, beautiful song. For tonight, there was a whole committee of people that put this together. So particular thanks to Sabrina and Matthew for tonight and for putting this together, and to their entire committee. And I am going to be the first of many, many people tonight to point out where's Susan Meyer, where's Marcia Malnick, who's totally hiding in the fourth row there, and of course, Rabbi Cohen. So, if you've read the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't read the book, you are in for a tremendous treat because it is an amazing work of history that tells our story. There's one other group that I wanted to thank tonight, and that is all of you. Because the book is about CBST, but about the community and our history that we have all built together. And so the book is an amazing work and an amazing story, but it is also the sum of where we have been for the last 40 years. So thanks to each and every one of you, no matter how long you've been here at CBST, you are a part of that history. And with that, I will turn it over to Rabbi Kleinbaum, our senior rabbi.
So I can't actually believe this is happening. This is one of those things where, you know, it actually does work out that a dream becomes reality. For so long, CBST had been the object of other people writing about us. People studying us, often with a little bit of a sense of, well, this is a little freakish, or isn't this an interesting little bit of a circus show, or isn't it a little sensational, and wow, isn't it kind of a little bit weird, and that's what made us interesting. And we've been prodded and poked and studied and analyzed and written about from so many different perspectives except our own. And it was always a dream to have something that would first of all tell the stories of our congregation in the voices of our community, in the images of our community, and it would place that story in the larger context of the history of New York City itself, of the LGBT struggle for human dignity. I don't even say for full equality. I want more than equality. I don't think straight people have it so great in this world. I want to really create a world in which there is full dignity for the humanity of everyone. And for LGBT people, that was a particular arc to look at. It's a story set in the midst, the epicenter of the story of AIDS and how it ripped through like a tsunami in this city and in our community. It's a story of men and women, and it's a story emerging into the world of trans and queer, bisexual, intersex. All these different stories are found here inside CBST. It's the story of struggle for social justice and of creating a more just world, of caring about things like climate change and how to revise and reimagine Torah and our tradition so that it would more deeply reflect the reality of our lives. So there is no one, I could imagine, in the world better to tell this story, more an insider who appreciated the quirks and the foibles, but also had the perspective of depth and of history than Rabbi Ayelet Cohen. Nobody in the world, I could imagine, could do this volume the way that she's done. We are so lucky that you are a part of us and could write about this with the talents you have as a writer, the talents you have as a thinker, as an artist, as the one who really cares and deeply appreciates art in this world. You'll feel that on every page of the book, not just in the fabulous and beautiful design that the designers that Marcia and Susan roped into working on this project because of their personal and professional histories, but the beautiful artistry in the way you understood the art that is, as Oscar Wilde said, ultimately, our lives are our greatest pieces of art. And you understand that, and you created a piece of art to reflect that. So we're incredibly lucky. As Nate said, Marcia and Susan, luckily for us, retired from their book publishing, book production business. Lucky for us, 40 years in the business they were, and they are really in charge of the CBST's book publishing department at this point. We're very proud to say that CBST now has a book publishing department. We've published 3 books. How many synagogues in the world can say that? And this one, each one becomes an even greater reflection of the soul of CBST, and also a legacy that we will give to generations that will follow us. Listen, make no mistake about that. If Christian medieval Europe left great cathedrals and huge monuments, we Jews as Am HaSefer, we left behind books. And what this community is going to do is in the books that you have been involved in most carefully, as co-editing with me the Sidur, which is now so much a fabric of CBST, we can't even imagine there was a time we prayed with something else, and now this book. These are monuments. This volume is greater than the Cathedral of Notre Dame in its reflection of culture. You think I'm exaggerating. They have Notre Dame, we have books. And this book is a part of that tradition. But right now, tonight, you are at a preview event. This is a very special moment, an incredibly historic moment that we're here today to celebrate. And the way we've chosen to do tonight's events, the book has any number of stories to tell about its writing, and there are many stories about how difficult and hard it was to make the collection. And I want to say very clearly now, so it's out there very publicly, we did a public appeal to everybody at CBST to contribute things to the book. If you sent something in, it's more likely than not it's in the book. If you didn't send something in and you're pissed off that we didn't reach out to you personally, I'll leave that sentence with an ellipses there to trail off. Also, if you responded to Harriet Beckman and her wonderful committee to do an interview for StoryCorps, more likely than not, that worked its way in. We did not hire Rabbi Cohen to go out and interview everybody in the synagogue. We hired her to go through our archives and the materials as it existed and to create this magnificent volume. But we did put out a call to every single person in the community to contribute flyers or notebooks or background to provide material. We did it to every former intern. We do photos. We asked for anything. So if you contributed something, more likely than not, we were able to use it in some way. If you didn't, next time we ask, we're serious. Okay, folks? So the process of the book has been a bit excruciating for those involved, and most notably I just want to do a public shout out to Rabbi Cohen's partner, Rabbi Mark Margolius, who's hiding in the back. But we owe a huge debt of thanks to him and to his living through many very late nights of writing and editing over and over and over again. So we're very grateful to you, Mark. And he's coming close to forgiving me. We haven't gotten there yet, but I think we're on the border. You think? And I want to just also acknowledge that tonight is their anniversary. So we're so happy that the two of you are celebrating your anniversary with us tonight, as all things should be here at CBST. So yet another thing on my debt list with Mark, but that's my business to try and make up later.
What could be more appropriate,
really, what could be more appropriate? Actually, Mark and Ayelet met in this room at a Shavuot Tikkun doing the Israeli dancing with Danny Pollock at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Wow. A Shavuot 10 years ago, right? Right where I'm standing on this holy ground.
A gold plaque. A plaque has to go.
Wow, as they say. So what we've chosen to do is I've asked, so Rabbi Cohen is going to offer some words and thought reflections, and then the program that you have. We've invited some people, and frankly, we could have done this program for 5 hours long to read some little snippets from the book, which end up being really headlines and little insights. But as you see when you read the book, there are many, many, many more on every single page. And we hope they'll give you a little bit of an insight into some of the special features of the book, some of the special people of the book, and Rabbi Cohen will be speaking around some of the contributors that you see, who will be reading, in some cases, things that they wrote, in some cases, things written about them, in some cases, artifacts or things from the period of time they represent at CBST, and in some cases, cross-generational readings of a generation today who's benefiting from the work of a CBST member long ago. And as I said, we could do this in any number of ways, so see this as a bit of a cantata tonight. And we look forward to hearing your feedback. If something moves you when you read the book, please let us know. Write to us, let us know. It's meaningful. If something particularly moves you, we'd love to hear about that. And with that, I'm delighted to welcome Rabbi Ayala Cohen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I have to say I am awed and a little bit scared to have the book finally beginning to be out there in its preview form, and to share with more of you what some of us have been sitting with as working on for many months. It took 3 years, the process of researching and writing the book. 3 years. 3. It felt like 4. It felt like 7. It's extremely moving to be in this moment, and I actually find myself at a little bit of a loss for words as we approach this moment. Rabbi Kleinbaum talked a little bit about why we wanted to do this book, and that it had really been a dream for a long time to create something like this. I want to say a couple of words about how I came to this project, which is really the same story as how I came to CBST, which, as you'll read in these pages, is very much the story of this remarkable community. I came here first for Pride in the early 90s. I used to come with my sister Tamara every year. I would come into New York, and she would take me here when Pride was still overflowing out of this building. I came for real in the year 2000 as a Cooper Berger Master Rabbinical Intern with Rabbi David Bauer. And we arrived at that moment. It was at the end of the worst of AIDS, and the absence of so many of the lions of this community was so palpable that part of our education as interns, part of our introduction to CBST, were the stories that Rabbi Kleinbaum would tell us about the people who were no longer here, who were still so very, very present. And as she told us about them with great love and humor and affection, and introduced us to people who could share their own stories, to Dick Radman, Zichrono Livracha, who would share with us his stories and his memories. Our introduction to this community became an introduction to those who came before, as well as those who were here and continue to make it a thriving and beautiful and changing place. It's an amazing and very difficult challenge to write the story of a living congregation. And I did my best, and it is not an easy task to tell so many stories of so many incredible lives, and to know at the same time that there are just as many stories that maybe we didn't uncover in the piles of unsorted papers, that we couldn't quite cram into the pages. As many wonderful interviews of people who sat through the StoryCorps project, a wonderful, wonderful initiative that Harriet brought to CBST. And we had about 50 hours of interviews. I'm sure there are 50 and 100 and 150 hours of unrecorded stories. And so each of these stories in some ways represents more stories that are untold, that are told elsewhere, that still can be told. And I hope that we can experience them for the taste. And that was really what we tried to do, is get a taste, is to tell the stories not only of CBST, but also of how CBST changed the world around. That CBST was very, very much a product of its time, founded in 1973 at the very beginning of the gay rights movement, the very beginning of this flowering of queer organizations in New York City. And it is still here to tell the tale, which is not the case for many of the other organizations founded at the time, but very, very much itself with its own personality. And as people moved through CBST, as people sat in this space, this community changed them and nourished them and inspired them. And the vast majority of the change that has happened in the Jewish world, of people who have gone on to be leaders in the LGBT Jewish world, sat here in this room, came through this space. They were here for a few weeks, they were here for a few months, they were here for years, and this place strengthened them and inspired them to do the work that they do in the world. And we wanted to tell that story. It is a very, very important piece of the story to tell. So I'm going to invite to join me some of our readers tonight, and as they read, I'll talk a little bit about what they're reading and how it fits into the book. And I'm thrilled to first invite Michael Levine. He's reading from a flyer that was distributed in early 1974. This is something that was copied and handed out to people when they came to services, and sometimes blown up if CBST was doing public events. An effort to explain what CBST was to the people who came.
Thank you, Rabbi. And again, the year is 1974. The Gay Synagogue is more than a house of worship. Rather, it is dedicated to total immersion by each person in their Jewishness, in our heritage, in enjoyment of the many facets of our lives, our language, our literature, our music, our customs, our traditions, our history, our holidays, and most important, a dedication to modern Israel. This is my favorite line. The founders, and most of the men and women in attendance, are homosexual. We wanted to make sure they knew when they arrived where they had gone. Why a separate synagogue for gays? We were frequently asked that question. Probably there are as many reasons as there are people in attendance. Some find it difficult to attend the establishment congregations where they are shunned, unless they conceal their predilections. Others have lost interest in religion completely, but find a special attraction and rapport with this group. Still others, with no religious background at all, are eager to establish their Jewish identity with this very special group. Perhaps the greatest attraction of all to those in attendance is the opportunity to openly practice our Jewishness and our gayness. Thank you.
So as you can see from the beginning, the founders were doing two things at the same time. One was creating a community where they could be openly gay Jews, which at the time was an extremely difficult thing to be, and there was nowhere else to be it in New York City. But you can see there was a sense of already understanding the importance of that moment and that phenomena. And even in the materials that they were creating for themselves, there was a sense of trying to explain to the world, this is who we are, this is what we are creating. And the world will change because of what we are doing. Through the materials and the interviews and the pieces of the archive, I was really honored to become a custodian of so many stories. It feels like a tremendous honor and responsibility to have been lent these memories and stories and to try to retell them. And I'm very humbled by that role, by that gift. I learned some stories that I had heard before. I learned some stories of people that I knew but did not know some of the amazing things that they told. And I also learned about some of the most significant members who I had not heard about, who had moved on before I got here. Two of these members, Roz Riggleson and Eleanor Lester, who were two of the first women to be very important members of the synagogue, I learned about primarily from Regina Linder, and I invite her to come up and read a few words about them.
Roz Riggleson and Eleanor Lester were role models and leaders in the early years of CBST. They taught us that we could be gay and successful professionals. A generation older than many of the early leaders of CBST, they were out as lesbians, acknowledged as a couple, and recognized in their professions, while many of the younger members were still struggling to find themselves. Roz and Eleanor, both significant writers and cultural critics, set the intellectual and cultural tone for the synagogue. They ran the Oneg after Friday night services, a major feature of CBST life for many years. One program, a reading of Isaac Bashevis Singer's Yentl the Yeshiva Boy, led to a visit by the author to CBST's Yiddish class. Eleanor and Roz met as undergraduates at Hunter College in the 1940s. Eleanor grew up in the Bronx with very little Jewish connection. The Six-Day War in 1967 informed her Jewish sensibility, and her involvement at CBST mirrored the increasingly Jewish focus of her journalism. Her New York Times Magazine article about Raoul Wallenberg and her subsequent book, Wallenberg, The Man in the Iron Web, brought his story to international attention. Another major article she wrote for the magazine focused on the resurgence of Yiddish. She became arts editor of the Jewish Week, a position she held until her death from lymphoma in 1990. Roz was an out lesbian decades before Stonewall. She had close friends among lesbian activists such as Barbara Giddings and Kay Tobin Lehausen. She knew Bayard Rustin. She taught courses on homosexuality at NYU long before the field of lesbian and gay studies existed. An advocate for queer sensibility before its time, Roz included transgender people in her classroom and in the life of CBST. Roz also merged CBST with her literary work. Yehuda Berger and others appeared in Secret Space, the movie she wrote that aired on PBS in 1976. When deadlines loomed at the Soho News, where she was a book editor, more than one CBST member contributed a last-minute book review.
Just a hint of some of the amazing stories that we are able to tell in ways that they're not told elsewhere. There are obituaries of Eleanor Lester in the Jewish Week in the New York Times, but none of them are going to tell a part of the story that is this part of the story. And when we think about the sacred responsibility of a community teaching the next generation, we're not only talking about the words of the Torah we have inherited, we're talking about the words of Torah that are created by the lives in this room. Is Jack here? So one of my favorite features in the book is an inset that we created called How I Got to CBST. And these are stories, usually excerpts of interviews, from the StoryCorps interviews, where people are talking about how they first found their way into this place. And they're such a perfect capsule of what the time was, of who the person was, of what they bring. So I'm going to invite Jack to come up and read how he got to CBST.
When I started to really come out, I experimented with not being orthodox. Almost the first thing I did was to go to CBST. I'd never gone before because I didn't travel on Shabbat. I had seen the ads in the Village Voice and I was so tempted to go. Going to CBST was the first healthy thing I did to meet gay people. Here I went as myself. I used my own name. I walked in and I met people and I cared who they were and what their names were. I walked around the block over and over. To get to that front door on Bethune Street, you had to walk through this narrow place, as we call it. God knows what's on the other side. Then you saw this endless ramp, and at the front door, I thought, what if I can't go in? I'm going to have to go all the way back down. It was very frightening. I didn't know what I would find. I didn't know what a homosexual was like. When I walked in, Murray Karger was sitting at the front door. I said, I'm here for the first time. He made this big deal out of it. It was scary, but also very welcoming that somebody cared that I walked through the door. I came back. I started becoming a person that people knew, and it became a comfortable place for me. I felt like I was with my people.
So in addition to the incredible stories that you'll read in the book, and I'm so moved to kind of, again, hear it in your voice, Jack, after hearing these recordings that I tried to transcribe and listen to again and again and tried to transcribe. And I also just want to say that many of the people in this room, including Jack, were people I really, really leaned on when I needed to clarify timelines or facts or figure out exactly how something went. I knew I could email and get an answer about when exactly something happened or who was involved in a particular saga, or if a certain episode kept coming up in different interviews, I could go to a few people and say, tell me more about this. Now, of course, when you're dealing with real people, sometimes you'll have 4 people who absolutely remember that it happened in a completely different way, which is where it's also helpful to have archives. And what you can't see, but you will see when you look through the pages of the book, are all of the archival materials that we included in the book. Really due to the genius of Susan and Marcia and the designers that they found and worked with, we were able to reproduce and include not only photographs, but also letters and flyers and brochures. So, you know, when we sent out those emails and said, if you have anything lying in your drawer, you know, please bring it in, we were really able to include images of some pretty amazing things and some pretty devastating things. As Rabbi Kleinbaum said, one of the really important chapters in our story and in this book is the chapter that talks about the impact of AIDS on CBST. And the first member that we know who died from AIDS was Michael Levine. And Yehuda Berger is going to come up to read a letter, an aerogram that Michael sent from Israel this summer to Yehuda and Mark Bieber this summer before he died.
Michael called himself Michael Levine, but not to confuse him with our own Michael Levine. We call him Michael Levy.
Hold the microphone to your chin.
He wrote
This is July 26th, 1981.
from Israel. Dear Howard and Mark, I was Howard at the time. I am now Yehuda. The rest here is doing me good as I try to regain some strength and improve my health. From May until July, I lost 20 pounds, and by the time I left for Israel, both my legs have picked up some severe reaction to something. Most probably. One of the drugs which my doctor prescribed gave me a hallucinogenic reaction, and for a couple of weeks I lost all bearing.